Hello, everybody. First of all, welcome to this channel. This is a new channel that I'm starting that's dedicated to political analysis, particularly analysis of elections, election results, candidacies, uh, presidential contests, whatever you want to name it, and essentially offering my analysis through a more of a middle of the road sort of lens as to what I think the future holds for both the Democrat and Republican parties. And what this video is going to be about is the 2028 presidential election. Now, a couple caveats. Number one, the 2024 election just happened. Donald Trump was just elected president of the United States, and he hasn't even assumed the office yet. So there's quite a lot of wiggle room within these predictions and a lot of uncertainty. But what I'm basing this prediction on is the likely early frontrunners for the nomination. That being Governor Gavin Newsom out of the state of California and Vice-President Elect JD Vance out of the state of Ohio. And there's a lot of uncertainty. Number one, we don't know which direction the Democratic Party is going to go in post-Trump era. We also do not know what's going to happen in the Trump presidency. We don't know necessarily what Trump's approval will be by the time 2028 rolls around. And we also do not know whether or not Trump's going to serve out his full term. Concerns about Trump's age are definitely valid. He's almost turning 80 years old, around the same age of what Joe Biden was. And we saw what happened in the most recent election, and most certainly it could happen again. Either way, Trump will not be the nominee again, and the most likely successor for him will be Vice President Vance. The Democratic nomination is a bit more uncertain, but Gavin Newsom likely remains the early favorite, especially among the establishment types within the party. And so I'm just going to go through some of the states here and see and offer you my perspective of where I think this election is going to go. If it were held perhaps today or perhaps by modern metrics, in which, in this current environment, it's particularly close elections. There hasn't really been a landslide election since Barack Obama. And ever since 2016, the Trump effect has produced pretty close elections along presidential lines. And that's generally the same metric I'm going to hold here. So I'm going to start off with some of the safe states. So Washington, Oregon, California, Hawaii, these more Western states I anticipate will stay in the Democratic column, along with the state of Colorado, which has shifted significantly Democrat since 2016. Also, along a lot of these Northeast states, Vermont, Connecticut, Delaware, Maryland, DC, Rhode Island, and Massachusetts. I can envision them staying with the Democratic Party. The state of New York as well. I do not think in this election that New York will narrow down underneath 10 points. I think it could perform relatively on par with last time. And even though the state of Illinois, when you look at the 2024 election results, it did get under 10, I do believe that in a case like this, that Gavin Newsom will perform a little bit better. And the reason I say that is I don't think that in this case would be either a vice president or President Vance will be able to energize Republican voters as much as the Republicans, as much as I should say Donald Trump can under his leadership. I just don't think that JD Vance is as charismatic of a figure or as energetic. He perhaps has good articulation and debate skills, but that's not totally what matters, and especially in a race where vibes matter. I don't think that Vance brings nearly as much energy to the table than Donald Trump does. But speaking of JD Vance, I'm going to fill in some of his safe states too. So that includes Alaska, some of these traditionally conservative Republican states, Arkansas, Louisiana, Mississippi, Alabama, Tennessee, Kentucky, Missouri, Indiana, South Carolina, West Virginia. I'm also going to fill in Ohio and Iowa in here. Um, in the last two election cycles, they've been likely states, but as been made evident, they have shifted significantly to the right. So much so that I do not believe that they're going to go back. I'll also put the state of Florida in the safe column too. I don't think that's going to shift to the left, really. Um, and let me just fill in one more for Gavin Newsom here. Maine's first district, I think, will stay safe in the Democratic column. Now, you have a lot of these other states up on the board. Let me go through some of the likely Democrat states. So, number one, New Mexico. New Mexico went to Trump by around 6 points, maybe a little bit more or less. I think that's going to stay roughly the same. And in a national environment where I don't think Gavin Newsom would do significantly better, but may improve in some places by like a point, maybe 2 points. I don't see personally New Mexico shifting that much. Same thing with New Jersey. New Jersey did narrow up significantly, but I do expect it to stay under 10 points, but it won't go any less than 5 for Gavin Newsom in this case. That is my prediction. The same thing for Maine at large. I don't really anticipate shifting at all either. I don't really think that Gavin Newsom offers much more to the table um, than what perhaps Kamala did. And the reason for that being is that I just think Gavin Newsom is just seen as another establishment West Coast elite type. And I don't think he inspires many voters outside of that, outside the Dem loyalist or sort of elitist sort of class type voters. I just don't think that he brings much to the table that really inspires the working class voters of this country. It doesn't really inspire youth, minority voters all that much. And I personally do not think he's the candidate to really do that. And something I should mention here too is who I have as the VP picks before I move forward. So I have Gretchen Whitmer as Gavin Newsom's VP pick. I think that's the most likely case. He would likely try to balance out the ticket with a Westerner um, sort of governor. But as we've seen with Tim Walz, it doesn't really make much of a difference. But I just kind of see her as the default pick. For Vance, I pick Glenn Youngkin. I think he's probably the safest pick. I think that he's the most likely. At this time, Glenn Youngkin won't be the governor. He will be a former governor because Virginian governors can't serve consecutive terms. Um, so he would probably have more time to dedicate to the campaign as well. But aside from that, let me fill in some of these likely red states. I could expect Texas to maybe narrow up a little bit to like a 9.5 point margin. Um, Newsom might perform a little bit better with minority groups. That's just personally my prediction. Um, but I don't think he's going to do anything spectacular. Um, and other than that, I don't see any other likely Republican states on the table. Oh, I should put Maine second district in there. I think that'll stay likely in the Vance column. So right now we're at Newsom 198, Vance 219. So just by these metrics alone, I think that Vance is in the advantage. And let me start and get these Rust Belt states right away. These are the most crucial battleground states that set the tone for the country. Um, I personally don't think Newsom is the guy to inspire these voters. As I emphasized before, he is more of a West Coast elitist type, similar to the perception of Kamala Harris. I just don't think he's the one to inspire these voters. That being said, I think he'll perform a little bit better than Kamala. You know, you could perhaps see him as someone maybe able to flesh out ideas a little more, someone maybe a little more charismatic, uh, someone who could speak a little bit better than Kamala Harris, but I don't think it's going to be anything wild. So I will keep Minnesota in the lean Newsom column, and I will flip Wisconsin in the tilt Newsom column. Wisconsin was actually the narrowest of the three key battleground Rust Belt states, and I think that Newsom could flip it. But I think that Vance, in this case, would keep Michigan along with that Pennsylvania. So up to this point, Vance is already at around 253, Newsom at 218. So you can see that Vance is clearly in the advantage. So let's go to some of the Sun Belt states. So Virginia, I could see staying in the Newsom column, but I think it can narrow up a little bit, especially if Vance puts Youngkin on the ticket. Maybe it could get to around 5 points. Best case scenario, maybe 4 for Newsom. Best case for Vance in this case. But I don't expect a massive shift under the current environment, assuming there's nothing major. But North Carolina and Georgia, maybe Newsom can make a little bit more ground, but I don't envision those states flipping. And with that, JD Vance has the presidency. This is what I can imagine so far. If we go up to New Hampshire, I can envision that going to Gavin Newsom by a lean margin. I wouldn't really expect those margins to change, maybe a little bit better for Newsom, but nothing spectacular. And for Nebraska's 2nd district, I can envision that going to Democrats as well. In terms of the Southwest, I think that these stay in the Vance column. I don't think that Gavin Newsom, again, is really the guy to make inroads with these working class voters. Maybe there's some minority groups he can do better with. Maybe he does well with Democrat partisans. Maybe making some appeals to some progressives. But again, I just don't see him as the guy to do the job. He's more elitist, more West Coast type. And he's also, I would brand him, if you were to compare him to anyone, it's the Democratic Mitt Romney. And I just don't see him really making inroads. And I think that Republicans have a lot to attack him on. Now, I don't know what the national environment's going to be like. Again, I don't know what Trump's approval will be. If Trump has a very low approval, you could certainly see Gavin Newsom eking out a win. It is possible that Newsom wins and flips some of these states. Maybe he flips Michigan. Maybe he flips a Georgia or a Pennsylvania or Nevada. That's possible. But I don't see it as likely. And with that, here's my prediction is JD Vance and Glenn Youngkin with 302 electoral votes, Gavin Newsom and Whitmer with 236. If you like this prediction, if you agree, disagree, feel free to let me know. Thank you for staying tuned and have a great day.